Since it's President's Day, there are no trials going on, but it actually works out because we are now seeing more and more of the media cover different stories that we've been keeping up with. And there's a couple that I wanted to go over with you, but the first one we're going to start with is the Brandon Barnes soon-to-be trial, which we covered last week. And if you don't remember, I'm going to do a quick recap. But Brandon was 21. He was married to Jessica, who was 20. They had two female roommates, Victoria and Kendall. And what we knew about it is that Brandon was having an affair with Kendall. Kendall also had a 9-month-old baby, and it sounds like it was Brandon's baby. But that hasn't officially come out yet. But it sounds like that's what it is. I'm sure we'll know more when trial starts. They had a pre-motion hearing last week, and Victoria and Kendall were both there, and Brandon opted not to go, which is always interesting when they do that. Victoria had been nothing but helpful with the police. She told them everything they wanted to know and said what her role was in it all, and just really realized that they had been caught and that she just wanted to be straightforward and helpful from that point. Kendall hasn't really said much. What we do know is she's claiming that she wasn't there at the time when Jessica died. So Brandon is accused of killing Jessica, and then Victoria helped him get rid of her body. We do know that whenever they did try to go and get rid of her body, Kendall was with them, and she was the lookout. She was up at their car, sitting in the car, and the two went into the woods together to try to dispose of the body. So we know enough of all of that, but there's been new interviews coming out because they did a missing person, and just Brandon trying to sound so sad and scared for Jessica. And I haven't listened to either of the things I'm about to play for us, but it should definitely be interesting, may even fill some of the holes in the story. We don't have a set trial date. We just know that it's coming, probably within the next month. But if you see it or have come across the date, put it in the comments below, because I have not seen a definite date yet. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I am still sick. I don't know if you can hear it through the mic or not. Very congested. I have a sinus infection. It's just not going well. So I'm happy to have a day like today where we can catch up with the things, but we also don't have to be sitting here for 8 hours trying to watch every second of a trial today. All right, so before I start this, I wanted to show you guys last week when we were talking about this, and I completely forgot, and I don't know how I did that, but let me move myself over. There's a picture I wanted you to see. So when they put out the missing person report for Jessica, they were out and about in their community, looking like they cared, and they didn't know where she was, and they were very concerned about her. And this is a photo of Brandon taking a picture by Jessica's missing person flyer. And when I saw this last week, I just think his face, maybe trying too hard, maybe, I don't know, not believable that this is somebody who is grieving and scared. It just didn't sit well with me. And so I wanted to show you guys that so you can tell me your opinion on this photo. But we're going to go ahead and play the first video I have. And I believe this is the one that will have him talking about her missing and him being sad about it. But let's see.
There's 3 total co-defendants. They took the body down to a location near Lake Hartwell, and they disposed of the body by burning the body in a plastic tote. Miss Mims served as a lookout during the burning of the body, and she also was just intimately involved in the process of getting rid of the body.
Mims is Kendall. That's her last name.
That was Kendall Mims in court last December for her alleged part in the murder of Jessica Barnes. Now this morning, the man in the middle is due to appear in a courtroom in South Carolina. Brandon Barnes is accused of strangling his wife Jessica to death. Police say it happened last fall at their home, a pool house that belonged to Mims' family. Now prosecutors say that Brandon then got their two roommates to help dispose of his wife's body. Now, Barnes admits to having sexual relationships with those two roommates, Kendall Mims and Victoria Trippet.
So that was something we didn't know last week. We knew that he and Kendall had a relationship. We didn't know anything about Victoria, which just makes this whole thing even weirder.
Chance meeting, Brandon Barnes was interviewed about his wife's disappearance, and this is just days before he became a suspect in her murder. He spoke to Troy Stiles about his last words to his wife.
She cried and told me she loved me, but I didn't think nothing of it. I just thought it was happy tears. I gave her a hug and I said, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through what you're going through. We're gonna get you help if you need it. I'm here for you. I'm supportive. And she knew I had to go to work because money, us, we never had stuff, so we had to work for stuff growing up. So other kids, they have it a little easier and a little boost. We didn't have a boost in life. And I was supporting a baby in Kendall, and Kendall started working, which helped a lot. But it was just trying to set a goal of getting us out of the house so me and her could start a life together. And Kendall knew that after the end of the year, I would separate to be with Jessica, and I would definitely visit my little girl when I can.
So that was the plan?
That was the plan, was to have a life with Jessica. Her mom always thought it wasn't, and her mom never believed. It was always judgmental. I always wanted a life with Jessica. I wanted it just to be me and her. But I was always broke. I didn't have no money. Couldn't afford a house. Didn't have good credit. I just wish I could have given her the world.
You know, it seems based on his interview.
All right, so what we knew and what we didn't know about that. Once again, we didn't know that Victoria had a relationship at some point with him, or just hooking up. And so evidently they did know that the baby, the 9-month-old, was Brandon's. That's all very interesting considering that Jessica still allowed both these other girls to live with them. 2 days before Jessica went missing, she supposedly had walked into the apartment and she saw Kendall and Brandon in the middle of the act, and she left. And she went to her mom's house, and the next day, Brandon went there to try to talk with her, and then it was the day after that Jessica was just gone and missing. So he was the last one to see her.
With Troy, that this guy was all about making excuses. I'm going to play a little bit more of what he said for you now. Take a listen.
I was traumatized as a kid and stuff, and my childhood was never really, I wasn't raised proper. I wasn't taught, hey, this is wrong, this is right. But I grew up knowing what I knew that was wrong and right, but I wasn't disciplined growing up much. But after Catherine, I chose for a better life, and that was what I was going for, and I've been doing good. The only problem I have is a big sex addiction, and that's one thing I learned when I was going through my alleged punishment in jail with Catherine. And there was a class in there about it, and I didn't even know it was even a thing until later when I got out and I started getting a little older and I started realizing, you got a problem with sex. But I really thought nothing of it. I thought it was normal, but deep down it ruins relationships.
My goodness, this guy making all kinds of excuses. He was traumatized as a kid. He's a sex addict. And remember, at this point in time, when he's talking to Troy, Jessica is still missing, and he has not been charged with her murder. So let's bring back in journalist Troy Stiles. He's also the family spokesperson now for Jessica Barnes's family. So Troy, I want to start with how Brandon, what was it like? Let's talk about what was it like being in the room with him, talking to Victoria, talking to Kendall, the lovers and the roommates, all prior to the time that they became criminal defendants.
Yeah, well, as you said, they are criminal defendants now, but at that time they were just suspects and hadn't actually even been named as suspects in this case. Jessica was still missing, and it's kind of by chance that I encountered them in the town square. They had recently.
Sorry, I realized the photo wasn't on this, but hopefully it's caught up now.
Just fled to Colorado and then immediately came right back. And then I just saw this guy hanging a poster and went and asked him if he was Brandon Barnes. When he said he was asked, I interviewed him and get us out of the story. And we sat down in the middle of the night in the middle of the town square. It's a small town, under 4,000 people. And you can hear the crickets in the background, and an owl shows up and starts hooting in the tree. I mean, it was just a bizarre scenario. But I really let Brandon take control of this first interview as I was trying to build a rapport with him, to try to get him to open up to me. And you'll hear that as we go through the audio. It was quite bizarre.
It really was. And love what you asked him. I want to listen to his response when you asked him about how he would feel if they found his wife, Jessica.
But if you find out that something bad's happened to her, and Kendall's in North Carolina, who do you have? How are you going to handle that?
I wouldn't think like that. Honestly, deep down, I don't want to get into those thoughts, but deep down, I would break down bad.
What did you think of his response, Troy?
Well, I wasn't sure really what to make of it, but I knew that everything that he was saying was just fabricated in his own mind, and everything was about him. Anything that I asked him about Jessica or anything about his, her feelings for him, it just all circled back around him and his abuse, and nothing about Jessica. So, she's the victim in this case, and she's missing. How would you feel if your wife goes missing, right? Well, he didn't have anything to say about his emotions about her being missing. He just had to say about his emotions, about how the people were looking at him in the town, and just really what people's perspective was of him. He didn't care anything about Jessica being missing.
Wow. Troy, what is Jessica's family thinking about all of this, about what is this sick, disgusting plot, if you will? We have a homicide and we have a cover-up, and police have charged them all. What is the family's reaction?
Julie, they burned her body completely, and they don't have all of Jessica back yet. She's evidence in this case. And so as we proceed into these hearings, which is the first time Brandon and the other defendants in this case have actually been into the courtroom, it's jarring for the family. The only thing they have left of Jessica is her Bible, which Brandon found a letter in her Bible addressed to him that she wasn't supposed to find for 10 years. But the family is riveted in this case. They're horrified at how she died, the abuse that led up to her murder, and the fact that they saw her go through all of this abuse, and to know that she died at the hands of Brandon Barnes, her abuser, it's just shaking.
Brandon, it's hard not to cry tears when you hear what you just said, that all the family has is her Bible.
Yeah, Julie. He burned everything that she had, all of her possessions. Jessica had actually left Brandon the night before. He said he didn't want her anymore, and she left. She had it. She went to her mom's house, and her things were on her porch, and they actually transported Jessica to the hospital. and she should have been under a psychiatric hold, but she wasn't. And Brandon was able to catch back up to her. He took her to his house, and then we learned that he actually murdered her the next day. So it's horrifying, and it seems that it could have been prevented. There were so many warning signs in this case. She actually was pregnant before this murder and lost her baby to fetal decomposition. But many have alleged that he beat the baby out of her, and we don't have any evidence of that. And of course, he's not charged in that as a crime or as a suspect. But there's so much abuse in this case, Julian. What we're learning is that fatal strangulation is a common occurrence. And if you have ever been strangled by your partner, you're 800 times more likely to die by homicide. So this is something that is in all of our headlines across the country. And South Carolina is the only state in the nation that doesn't have legislation to support non-fatal strangulation, which we need very desperately in South Carolina.
Wow. That's a segment for another day. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Troy. Certainly a sign of lethality in a relationship, as you said, if there's strangulation. Tell me, when we think about these other two women, let's go through them. So talking first about Kendall and then Victoria. Brandon has a child with Kendall, but my understanding, Troy, he lied to his wife, Jessica, and said that the baby was his niece because he lied and said that Kendall was actually his sister. Do I have that right?
You do, Julie. In fact, Kendall lied as well and kept the front up that she was his sister. And then Jessica later, of course, found out that the child that she was giving birth to was, in fact, Brandon's. So, that's what I think has captured everybody's attention is, the people in this case, the characters and them living together and that sort of thing. And Brandon is like this playboy. But, all Jessica wanted to be was a good wife. And the only thing she wanted, she had this whole list of things that she wrote out that she wanted to give. And the only thing she wanted was one thing, that was to be loved. And Brandon wouldn't do that. So as far as Kendall goes, Kendall, she's a great girl. She's smart. She wants to be a prostheticist. And, she had plans of going to college and she knew exactly what she wanted to do. And Julie, the question's out there, is she a victim too? So victimization can cause a lot of times people to become suspects or criminals. So, while she's charged in this case with misprision of a felony and obstruction of justice, we're not sure that she's not a victim herself.
Oh, that's an interesting take. Troy, I appreciate that. And when you look at this from Jessica's perspective, because it seems weird as we look at it from the outside, these people living together and he's having sex with all of them. But from Jessica's perspective, she's convinced Kendall is his sister and the baby is her niece. And then Victoria's her friend, right? Troy, Victoria was actually Jessica's friend first.
No. So Kendall and Brandon lived together first, and then Victoria was kind of the fresh person on the scene. Victoria was only there for just a few weeks before this murder occurred. So I think that was a dynamic that caused the abuse and possibly, the relationship to shift so much there when it did. And in a second interview that I conducted with them, they kind of elaborate deeper into that. But yeah, Kendall was there first, and they actually lived in Kendall's grandfather's pool house. And I think Kendall's family felt like this was a safer situation for Kendall to be in, where she could be, under the eyes of her grandfather, who actually played a very instrumental role in, tracking them, along with, he placed trackers in the car and he was able to give that as evidence to authorities. And that's how we were actually able to locate her body. But yeah, Victoria kind of showed up right before Jessica's murder. And, my part 2 of our interview is not out yet, but I asked Victoria in part 2, are you a mean girl? She seems like a very mean girl. She has no empathy at all for Jessica being missing. And we later found out that she was actually in the room and witnessed Jessica's murder. And the whole time in these interviews, there's a lot of laughing. It's aggravating to listen to, even myself.
Gosh. Oh my gosh, this is a horrifying case, and you certainly have so much inside scoop. Troy Stiles, we appreciate you sharing all of this. And of course, at the forefront of our reporting here on Opening Statements is the victim, Jessica Barnes. And please let us know how her family is doing, and we'll continue the conversation as these cases progress. As you know, Troy, Brandon Barnes is going to be in court this morning at 10 a.m. And so we're going to watch some of his proceedings together. Troy Stiles, a big thank you to you for coming on the program and sharing your interviews with us.
So there's a lot with that we didn't know, and it sounds like even Julie Grant had no idea. Let me get this one set, and then I'll say the different things. Okay, so I had no idea that Victoria was only there for a matter of a couple weeks before this happened, and I'm trying to even figure out, did she know them beforehand? If she had any physical thing going on with Brandon, when did that happen? Was it only for those 2 weeks? But yeah, like they were saying, Victoria was there for the actual murder and helped him get the body out of the apartment, helped him do all this stuff. And she had only been there for 2 weeks. That's maddening. Originally, they were going to bury her remains, and after going to where they wanted to bury her, they realized because of the bedrock that they couldn't actually dig. It wouldn't work. It was too hard. So they decided to burn everything. But we didn't know that they had actually taken her possessions too and burned those with the body. So that is insane. And both the girls were around for that time. So they helped. And, you know, he was talking about how Kendall has so much good going for her and all this stuff, but yet she played a role in this and didn't go to authorities and helped him. She was +1. Yeah, it is very weird. I hope that both of the girls' families will actually speak out so we could get more information. I mean, once a trial happens, we'll get it all. But as you see, we hear and read certain things, and it's not necessarily concrete yet. So it's good to be keeping up with these different interviews as we're waiting the trial. But yeah, I feel like more and more keeps coming out over time, and crazy. I think it was funny that Brandon's talking about being a S addict, because he said, and then I grew up and I realized that this probably isn't that normal. He was only 21. Jessica was 20. They were all very young still, and clearly he had major problems. I mean, it's just ridiculous the things that he was doing. And to have Kendall living with them saying, oh, it's my sister and my niece, when it's his child, and he continued an affair with Kendall and she's living there, it's just horrible. Let me go ahead and get this next one started.
Good Monday morning to you. Welcome to Opening Statements. I'm your host, Julie Grant. Are you ready for some coffee and some court on this President's Day? We got a great show planned, so let's get it going. Grab that cup of coffee right now. It's time for my opening statement. All that was left was her Bible. All that was left was her Bible. In the shocking, sickening, twisted case of the murder of 20-year-old Jessica Barnes, after she was strangled to death and her remains disposed of, all of her belongings were burned as well. Everything except for her Bible. And that Bible is the only possession of Jessica's that her family now has to cling to as they're grieving her death. How heartbreaking is that? Jessica Barnes should still be here, but she's not, because her husband allegedly strangled her to death. And what's more, He and their 2 housemates allegedly disposed of her body. Her husband was allegedly cheating on her with their 2 housemates. Now, if these allegations are true, that rotten, pathetic excuse for a husband deserves the stiffest penalty that South Carolina law allows. You want out of your marriage? You want to sleep around? Get a divorce. It's that simple. Nobody has the right to commit murder. This case makes me mad. Jessica Barnes deserves justice. Her family deserves peace. They should be able to give her a proper burial. And may God be with them as they grieve Jessica's death and disappearance, and as they seek justice and punishment for whomever is responsible. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
Not only was the defendant having an affair with Baker, but they were also swinging.
Oh, the Monica Cementelli trial. So much to say on that, but we're going to skip it for the moment and stay on task. Okay, yes, he does talk about
dispose of Jessica Barnes's body were in court on Friday for their preliminary hearing. Brandon Barnes waived his hearing. The judge found probable cause and bound the women over, Kendall Mims and Victoria Tippett. They'll all be heading up to big court for their trial. The lead investigator in the case taking the stand, revealing some sickening new details about the homicide.
You can, at some point, you can see the tote being brought out of the pool house by Brandon Barnes with the assistance of Ms. Mims and Victoria Tippett due to it, the dead weight of the body being in the tote. It's put in the HHR. Again, it's driven around. Apparently, what they told us was they were searching for a location to dispose of the remains before they ultimately ended at the location on Twin Lakes Road.
Oh, this is so heartbreaking. We have 2 very special guests we're going to be welcoming on the show this morning. We have the family spokesperson for Jessica Barnes's family. He's also a journalist. Troy Stiles is joining us. And also this morning we have hope to be joining us, Cecilia Varvera, who is Jessica's mother. And I want to be fully transparent with our audience, Troy. As you know, we had the shot up and we're having some technical difficulties. So as we're working to repair that, I'd like to go to you on this story. You were so kind to join us last week and really take us into that home where Jessica was living with her husband and these 2 housemates who apparently all turned on her, according to what police are saying. Troy, what do you think was the root of all of this?
Well, Julie, it seems that Brandon Barnes is the root of all of this. He certainly has a colored past. There's allegations of abuse, and he's actually been charged and convicted for the same types of crimes, domestic violence in the past. He's a serial strangler, and all of his victims in the past have spoken of this, just horrific amounts of abuse. And, as mentioned before, I'm not sure that the other 2 girls, the housemates, Victoria Tippett and Kendall Mims, aren't victims of his as well as suspects in this case, Julie.
You mentioned that the other day, and we just didn't have time to dive into that, but let's do that a bit now. Troy, when you say serial strangler, my understanding is there was an incident with Ms. Mims. Is that right? Did he strangle her at one point?
Yes, and he actually, there's another ex and they spoke of it in the trial or in the preliminary hearing. Her name is mentioned in the preliminary hearing as well, but he was charged in the state of Maine for criminal domestic violence, and she was interviewed, and she actually had to flee to the state of Maine to get away from Brandon and took him with her. Because that was where she could find safe shelter. And yes, Kendall Mims has certainly spoken out about the abuse that she suffered from Brandon and alleges that he strangled her as well. So, it's certainly something that we know is common with stranglers, that, you know, once they do it, something just kind of gets lit up. So strangulation is certainly it's a terrifying thing, and it seems to be the one type of abuse where the person on the receiving end just gives everything that they've got, and they relinquish all control to the abuser.
Excellent points, Troy. We talk a lot about domestic violence and domestic violence prevention on this program, and you're right, that is a key sign of lethality in a relationship. If that is going on, that is potentially what could happen. Someone could die. And here, police are saying that's what happened to sweet, beautiful Jessica. And Troy, I want you to stand by for me, please, because I'm being told we now have Cecilia Varvera, Jessica's mother, joining us by phone. We could see her moments ago and the shot just dropped out, but at least we can speak to you, Cecilia. So if you can hear me, I just want to start by saying, person to person, I'm so sorry for your loss, and from all of us here at Court TV, our heart goes out to you as you're grieving your daughter's death. Tell us, please, what you make of this situation and how her husband and their two housemates are being accused in her death and her disappearance.
It's very tragic thing that happened to Jill and to our family.
Okay, and Cecilia, I'm so sorry. I'm just going to interrupt you for a second because I want to hear every word you're saying, and apparently we're having trouble with an echo. So while we have our technology experts work on that. Troy, let me go back to you because it's through your work as a journalist, your company, Blunt Force Media. You did great interviews with Mr. Barnes before he was cuffed and locked up. You've gotten to know the story so well, and now you're speaking for the family. You shared with us such helpful, insightful information the other day. Could you speak, please, to their reaction? You know, when they hear the daughter's missing, was the first thought, oh my gosh, could Brandon be the one responsible?
That absolutely was the first thought. And Julie, we actually have, a part of our company represents families who find themselves the spotlight of a crime story, especially, you know, big spotlight stories. So I've actually worked with Cecilia and her family since the day that Jessica was reported missing. So Cecilia had shared with us a photo of Jessica that was horrifying, where she had just been beaten very badly. And so, you know, we knew that this was going to be a serious case. Of course, you know, oftentimes in missing persons cases, people come back. And so we were really hopeful that Jessica would come back. But eventually we realized that that was not going to be the case. And while Pendleton Police Department, which is kind of a tiny police department, while they conducted their investigation, we still had to hang flyers in the square and pretend like this was still a missing persons case, even after we knew that Jessica's remains had been found and we were waiting for positive identification through an odontology expert. But I have stood by this family from the very beginning, attended, you know, all of the hearings, and just spent such a large amount of time and, you know, in their intimate setting and with their family. And it's been quite a life-changing experience to be a part of their family throughout this, and to see just the pain that they're going through. And what happened to Jessica is horrendous. It really is.
It is, and they're lucky to have you, Troy. You know, victims, family members, you know, also are victims, as you know, and going through the criminal process isn't an easy one. They need an advocate, and there are people, as you know, who are victims advocates who work in the court system day in and day out. I always call them the unsung heroes of the system, because, you know, they're literally wiping tears off of family members' faces. They're holding the hands of family members as they have to see the person that did harm to their loved one. And here, you're essentially doing that. You may not be working in the courthouse, but you're essentially doing that outside for the family, and that's really commendable. I want to back up, Troy, to what you said. So we know that Jessica was killed, according to police, on August 2nd, 2024. You said there was an incident where Cecilia shared with you some photos where Jessica was badly beaten. How close in time do you know was that beating incident to August 2nd?
About 6 months before, and she had shared those with a friend of hers, and then that friend shared it with her mother and said, hey, I think something is really bad going on and you need to be aware of this. Jessica had left Brandon on July 31st, and she actually went to her mother's house and put her things on the porch. And she kind of had like a mental breakdown, and she had made threats of self-harm. And then Pendleton police dispatched the ambulance that transported her to the hospital. And we're not sure really why Jessica wasn't placed on a psychiatric hold, but she wasn't. And she was actually able to leave the hospital, where Brandon in turn caught up with her and then allegedly murdered her 2 days later. He strangled her in front of Victoria, which is one of the housemates. And then they, of course, as you hear in the preliminary hearing, they drove all over the state of Georgia and with her body to try to find a place to hide it before coming back to where Brandon actually originally met Jessica. And that's where they burned her to nothing. There's nothing left of her except 3 teeth and a jawbone.
I read that it horrified me. Troy, you're right. And when you were explaining to us the other day, Jessica's family can't even give her a proper burial, which has to be so dreadful. I'm being told we've repaired Cecilia's audio. So Cecilia, Julie Grant again here. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties we're having. We certainly want to hear what you have to say. Tell us, please, what you want to say to Brandon Barnes, Jessica's husband.
I hope that you'll find Jesus, and Jessica wanted to be loved and cherished, and she wanted you to be a man of God like you know already. And I hope where you are right now that you'll get your Bible and repent for what you did.
Cecilia, tell us more about your beautiful daughter.
Jessica was a sweet girl. She was like my right hand, helped me with everything in the house. She was helping everybody who needed help. Very selfless girl. She was an artist. She liked to sing, to draw, to make jewelry. She was the sweetest girl.
She deserved to be loved. As you said, she deserved to be respected. She deserved to be safe in her home. Did you ever get the sense that she was unsafe there?
I did have a little bit of sense of that when I saw the picture in 2003. Some friends sent it to me. Her best friend sent the picture to me, and I went immediately with my friend to report the incident. And after that, I did a couple of check on her to see if she's okay, and it led to this murder in the end.
Cecilia, what did she tell you about that incident?
She did not want to talk about it. She did not want to talk about it. She was pregnant at that time. That was when it happened, it was in November, and she gave birth to a still baby on Easter Day.
Do you have any suspicion that Brandon did that unborn baby any harm?
I do. I think it was his face was very angry, and he was very disrespectful to me as Jessica's mom. And my kids, they were very scared of him.
Cecilia, we're so sorry for your loss, and we certainly are remembering your beautiful daughter here on this program, and we'll continue to remember her as the case progresses, and we'll continue conversing with Troy Stiles, a journalist and family spokesperson. Blunt Force Media is the company again, and check out those interviews with Brandon Barnes. They are chilling as we listen back to them. Cecilia, thank you. We'll hopefully get you on camera next time. We'll keep talking. And Troy, big thank you to you as well. We'll talk again soon. Take good care. And coming up next.
That mom has more composure than I could ever hope to have if I had to give an interview about this with one of my children. Oh my gosh. I would be out of my mind. So I put it in the comments, but I'm gonna tell you, I found the interview that Brandon's ex-girlfriend gave of him, so we're gonna watch a little bit of that.
To protect our privacy, we are withholding the...
Okay, let me get it set up. We're not gonna play the whole thing. Sometimes YouTube will take that as copyright. So we're not going to do that. And if there's any audio, like if you need me to turn it up or down, let me know. I think I have it on a good setting right now, but all right, let's see.
Last name of the individual, Brandon Barnes. She says she experienced every manner of abuse and tried desperately to escape the relationship. It wasn't until a nurse recognized that she needed help. So much for taking the time to join me. I know this has been an emotional time for you as you deal with, learning of what happened to Jessica, learning that Brandon was involved. But I wanted to sit down with you a little bit and just talk about your time with Brandon because, you spent a little over a year with him starting in 2021. Were you guys just dating?
In the beginning, no. We were just friends, and then it turned into dating.
Okay. And where were you living when you met him?
I was actually living in a house that my father gave me. Right here
in Florida
Chester.
or so. Chester? Okay. And how did you meet him?
Through an online app called Meet Me.
Okay. So when you met him, you guys started out as friends. Was he dating anybody else at that time?
Not that I know of. He could have been, but I don't know.
Okay. And at some point, I feel like I saw somewhere where at some point you ended up in Florida with him.
Yes. He had caused a bunch of problems with my dad, and my dad kicked us out of the house. So we went to stay with his legal guardians, Kathy and Richard, in Florida. Stayed at their house.
Okay. And so we're not going to talk about details about your kids, but you have 2 kids. Are they both Brandon's?
Yes.
Okay. So you moved to Florida with him. You're staying with his guardians. How old was he at that time?
I believe he was 19, if I remember correctly.
Okay. And when you got there, were there any red flags? Like, did things start to deteriorate after you moved out of South Carolina with him?
When we went to Florida is when he progressed to trying to choke me and leaving marks all over me to the point I have scars on my body now. But it just got worse in Florida.
And so he would choke you, and was he hitting you or?
Yeah.
Okay. Was there any other physical abuse?
Throwing things at me, verbal, mental, and of course the physical.
Okay. And at what point did your relationship become more than friendship?
When he came to live with me because his mother and stepfather kicked him out of the house.
Okay. So
So, a couple things. I cannot wait to hear what his parents have to say about him during the trial. At some point, that will come out, and we will get to know more details. Putting it in perspective, though, for you, by the time he was 20, he had 3 children that we know of by 2 different ladies. That is very interesting. I had no idea that he had 2 other kids with this person. Not a good situation. Clearly, if his parents are kicking him out when he was a bit younger, that's not good. There has to be probably really good reasons why. So this whole thing is not surprising, but it is no good.
So that was in South Carolina. So he got kicked out of his house with his mother and stepfather and came to live with you in South Carolina. Your dad and him clearly did not get along. So you moved with his guardians in Florida.
Yes.
Okay. And when did you learn you were pregnant with this child?
When we were actually in South Carolina, I had our daughter here in South Carolina.
Okay. So before you left for Florida?
Yes. She was 3 months old when we lived in Florida.
Okay. And okay, so you're in Florida, and did his guardians know that there was anything going on while you were living there, or was he pretty, did he hide it well?
They knew. They actually kicked him out of their house for 2 days, but let him back in, stating that he changed when I begged them not to because I knew he didn't change.
Okay. Did you feel like you were able to ask for help while you were there?
I've tried, but they would literally just keep telling me that it was nothing.
Okay.
So
and were you, I mean, I noticed.
Her guardians didn't listen to her saying, he hasn't changed, it's only been a couple days, this is bad, this is a problem. And she was ignored.
One thing that Jessica Barnes' mother said was that Brandon had isolated her from her family, cutting off contact frequently. Did you experience that when you were with him?
I did. It was so bad that he used to lock me in my room with a padlock on the outside of my door. And he would drug me up on Benadryl so I'd sleep all day and couldn't go nowhere.
Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that you got out of that situation.
Where are the adults in this situation?
So now at some point, the 2 of you ended up going to Maine. When was that?
When we were actually in Florida, it was our 2nd month. I kind of told Brandon a lie. I told him I could get my old house in Maine. My family is from Maine. So we went up there. When we were up there, I was looking for places where I could get out. Because I have a lot of family up there where I could hide. He was not happy when he found out I lied about the house.
Whew. Did he have any family up there, or was it all your family?
It's just my family.
Okay. And at some point, you got pregnant with your 2nd child, right?
Yeah. I conceived my son in Florida.
Okay. And then, so you were pregnant when you went to Maine, and you were looking for a way to get out of this situation.
Yes.
So what happened when he found out that there wasn't a house there for you?
He basically kept punching me over and over again. to the point I was put into the hospital.
And you were pregnant at this time?
Yes.
Okay. Did he ever assault your daughter?
Yes. He actually tried to choke her when she was crying one day because she wanted a bottle while I was trying to prepare it. He was slapping her, trying to choke her.
If that is all true, he is seriously unhinged. Like I said, I'm not going to play their whole interview. Let me skip a little bit of it.
Yes. One was through Kendall's account. And then
On
another,
Facebook?
yes. And another, he made up a fake account under some weird name to try to reach out to me.
And did you just block him? Did you ever respond? What did he say?
I responded to Kendall because at first I thought it could have been her. You know, I was trying to tell her to get out while she could. And then after a few messages, I realized it was him and then I blocked her.
Okay. So, I mean, when you heard about what was happening with Jessica when she went missing, what were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts were how to protect my kids.
Right. Did you have any indication where this story would go?
Not at all.
Like, did you think, oh, this isn't good. I'm worried about the outcome. I guess from your point of view, it could have gone either way because you did get out in a safe house.
Yeah. I was kind of hoping when I seen the messages on Facebook that she was going to a shelter. I was kind of hoping she was just in a shelter.
Yeah. So I know hearing the charges must have been, I know because, we were texting when everything was starting to break. It must have been a shock for you. And a relief that you did get out of that situation.
Yeah.
How did you feel when everything started to come out?
I actually broke down crying.
Just a lot.
I was kind of hoping it wasn't true.
And you've spoken to, in the course of this investigation, you reached out to the investigators who were, the lead on this case to describe your experience with Brandon and also Jessica's family.
Yes.
So, just perspective on what you went through. And I know you.
Good for her. Good for her for reaching out to the police to give her story and what went on with their relationship, but also the fact that she reached out to Jessica's family. I think that was really kind of her. And even doing interviews like this, she's doing it and putting out this awareness for other people of horrible things that she had to live through. So it can't be easy, but at least she's able to do it. And who knows how many people she could end up helping that are in very similar situations. I'm going to end the interview now because I didn't want to play the whole thing. Don't want to steal their full content or anything. But yeah, it's beyond me that something like this can get to that point where you question why people don't leave when they're in a bad situation. And it's too bad that Jessica wasn't put on that mandatory 2 or 3 day hold, because that might have been long enough for her to figure out what she needed to do and to change course and maybe even like protecting herself, finding the right person, police officer, or talking to a doctor, somebody. But maybe it could have helped with that, and it maybe could have been avoidable. Brandon sounds like a narcissist. He sounds like he has major issues and really would prey on these girls, my opinion. Saying whatever lie he needed to be able to get the outcome that he wanted. And it's just horrible. So it will definitely be interesting when more people who know each of the parties get called to the trial to testify. I have no doubt his parents will. Me and Astro in the chat were talking about the grandpa that was letting them live in the pool house. I'm sure he will be there to testify. But I also wanted to say, in case you hadn't followed along with us the other day, that Kendall actually twice now has asked for her bond to be there so she can bond out and be with her baby, and she has been denied twice. And besides the lookout aspect of it, of her being in the car, making sure no one's going in the direction that Victoria and Brandon were in, she also, somewhere on camera, I'm not exactly sure if it was like a parking lot camera for these like trees, woods, I have no idea, but it showed that Kendall was carrying gasoline, which is what they ended up using to burn her and her stuff. So that even more goes into, fine, she wasn't there for the actual murder, but she did these other things to help, and it makes her guilty of all of these different things. I mean, maybe not the extent of what Brandon's going to be found guilty of, but definitely enough that she doesn't deserve to be bonded out, which is why they have said no twice. I did one more bit of looking before we ended this video. I wanted to see about a possible start date, and they still say that they don't have a date or time yet. So, like I said, if you see something, put it in the comments. I'll go and look later, and so next time we talk about this, I'll be able to say. But as I see, it's not up yet, but it's getting there. It should be in the next couple months, since they had their promotion hearing last week. All right. Thank you for watching. I will be back on here in just a little bit. There's other trials that we've been following that I want to find more information on. The Megan Boswell trial is something that I am digging and digging through, because as we know, she was found guilty for killing her 15-month-old baby, Evelyn. And then we found out during the trial that Megan was pregnant again. And we know nothing on that. We don't know if she lost the baby. We don't know if she had the baby or gave the baby up for adoption. We know nothing. So I'm sleuthing. Give me time. But also, then the other one I am sleuthing is the Colleen Griffith murder trial. So as we know, he was found not guilty in killing his mother. But Oklahoma, when he killed his father, they had determined that he was just protecting himself, so they didn't press charges. But we think that there is a high probability that now that he killed his mom too, that Oklahoma is going to go after him. So I've been checking that several times a day because I am very curious with it. So if I find any of that, we will also be discussing that, but it might take a few days. Hopefully, I want answers on both. All right. I hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully you like this kind of content. I definitely will be keeping up with this trial. I'm excited to be able to sit and watch the whole thing. It's not like it's a New York courthouse where they don't film. South Carolina does, so we'll get to learn a lot. All right. Thank you for watching, and I will be on in a little bit.